And so with the European American group, if it's true what was being said at Notre Dame, that there has been a kind of a forgetfulness of what culture is, how it works, and cultural identity of your European American groups, we have a problem. Because what it means is that now we don't have a vehicle by which our faith could really engage who we are, because culture is about who one is. In contrast, the Latinos are struggling to figure out who they are in this new context. And to the extent that there's still Latinos, there's still a vehicle by which there are customs and there are attitudes that they bring with them that are very much part of their culture, but also products of 4 centuries of Christianization. Not that they're perfect Christians or perfect Catholics, but that there are values that are very inherent to who they are, that are of great value and of great importance to the church. I would venture to say the struggle that they go through to try to make family work, to try to make marriage work, and the fact that the psychological space within which they tend to move and breathe is still less individualistic than our standard American way. And individualism is an issue, I would say, in truly being Christian. Huh? As a matter of fact, in this little book here, Cardinal Dulles, before he died, he was really into what I'm talking about here right now. He wrote quite a bit. His last book, matter of fact, it was published posthumously, Evangelization for the Third Millennium, Cardinal Dulles' last book. Because he really felt that this is where the argument has to go. This is where we have to, and being a systematic theologian interested in this, because not a lot of his colleagues were that interested in it, huh? But he was, and he saw it very clearly, and so I put up the reference up there. But anyway, in these talks, it's a collection of his final talks. Toward the end of his life, he couldn't talk anymore. He could just write, and he ended up writing that book. In another little book, though, called Evangelizing America, he has a chapter called The Impact of the Catholic Church on American Culture, okay? And in that, he has this to say. Let's see here. He says, there's a strategy by which the church can really proclaim and engage American culture. And this is a strategy that he refers to build on the popular religion of immigrant ethnic groups that actually practice the faith in their own American neighborhoods. This process worked reasonably well before World War II, when the Klan and the neighborhood did so much to transmit Catholic sensibilities into new generations. Most of these ethnic enclaves, as I have mentioned, are much weaker today. But the waves of recent immigration from the Philippines, Vietnam, Korea, and Latin America have produced new centers of Catholic culture. In particular, the large and growing Hispanic presence arouses great hope and interest. Okay? So he says, though, he goes on to say, it's not going to be easy, though. If we realize the importance of this strategy and give emphasis to it, we might be able to create a situation where the Catholic Church has an opportunity to influence American culture like it did 100 years ago with the coming of the working class Irish and the working class Italians and so forth. Can we learn anything from that experience about Catholic identity and how to maintain it and so forth and so on? I mean, that's a big question. but I throw it out as a framework to understand what we're struggling with in parishes or dioceses in more, nitty-gritty ways. But the stakes are very high. It's literally, is this going to be a dynamic, flourishing church, or is it going to be a diminishing church that will kind of begin to get old and not fill the pews with new people? And indeed, when you go around the country and you see what's going on, where is all the life, where is all the vitality? It's frequently in these immigrant parishes, or where you have the working class people. Father Fitzpatrick, you may have known Father Joe Fitzpatrick, was a sociologist at Fordham, New York Jesuit, who was very much involved with the Puerto Rican ministry in New York and worked a lot with Cardinal Spellman and then Cardinal Cook and then Cardinal O'Connor. He worked for many years. He died a few years ago. He wrote an article that also speaks to us a dimension of this. I was talking to Brother Chris about it on the way over. He wrote an article in America titled "Serving the Hispanic Poor in a Middle-Class Church." And the point that he was making is that the drama that's going on, at least with the Hispanics, has something to do with the fact that, by and large, we American Catholics have become middle class. We weren't always middle class, or even actually somewhat upper class. You know that your European American Catholics are more affluent than the Presbyterians. We're only below the Episcopalians. Okay, so that tells you something, doesn't it? So, and this over a period of 100 years, this transformation occurred. Well, at the same time, after the Second World War, what happened? There was an influx of new groups of Catholics. And so now the Catholic Church is kind of both, somewhat affluent in terms of its membership, but also has a lot of working class immigrant poor people. And the structures and the way we do things corresponds, to what's possible when you have a church that's financed at the middle class level and a church that the newcomers are not used to, that kind of financing. For instance, just a rather elementary example. Years ago, before the lawyers became rather prominent in the church, if you were at a parish, a group of Hispanic parish, and you needed to paint the parish, a job that normally would cost $5,000, let's say, you just tell the people, I need to paint the parish. And the people would say, okay, Father, don't worry, we'll take care of it, we're painters. Okay, but you know what happens now if you do that? They'll say, are they bonded? Have you checked it out with the lawyers? And, oh no, we better not fool with that, that could get us into liabilities. And so you need to go to somebody who's going to charge you $5,000 and pay them $5,000, instead of getting it more or less for the cost of the paint. Just a little example. But that's the example of how in our society with its complexity, we work, and the people and their usual expectations are much more elementary. When they say, we're going to build a church, Padre, we're going to build a church, very good, but if you go to Mexico and you see how they build churches, they mean, project is going to take us 20 years, but we'll eventually build a church, They just bring things little by little and they keep working at it. Well, we can't do things like that in a sophisticated economy like the one we have here. So these are part of some of the structural issues, that we are confronting. Okay, I don't want to get too far off track here. So, good. We have, I'm going to go for 5 more minutes.